Okay, yeah, so the topic is the 5 pillars of recovery. So in recovery, it's always spoken of that the addict needs to be 3 things and to do 5 things. So to be the 3 things that they need to be are honest, open-minded, and willing. And then the 5 things that they need to do are the 5 pillars of recovery. So the 5 pillars of recovery are like a life raft for the addict. So if you can picture sitting in the life raft, and the life raft's got 5 huge airbags, which are the 5 pillars. So if one deflates and you're not using that pillar, deflating that airbag of that life raft, then slowly water's starting to, it could possibly start to get into that life raft. You take another airbag away, and certainly your center and water is going to start coming into that life raft. You take, and then you take away the third airbag, and then you're starting to sink. That life raft is starting to fill up rapidly with water, and you're starting to sink, and you're going to end up in the ocean. So it is essential for the addict to work all 5 pillars of recovery, to stay centered, to stay balanced, to be committed to their recovery. So I'm going to go through the 5 pillars. So the first pillar is meetings. So meetings are the face-to-face or online meetings. And these meetings are the fellowship meetings. So depending on the addict, they can join, as we know, the Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous or Eating Disorder Anonymous or Gambling Anonymous, and they all a 12-step fellowship. And they are face-to-face, so that is in person. You actually physically go to the meetings. Or there's also the online platform. So the beautiful thing about COVID, one good thing that actually came out of it was the online platform for the meetings, because some people live in small towns, they don't have access to in-person meetings. So to find a meeting, you can just Google AA or NA meetings near me, and a whole list of meetings will come up, what days they are, where they are, what times they are, or you can Google online AA meetings or NA meetings. There's even an online meeting that runs every single hour, all day, every day, for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's a meeting every single hour online. Face-to-face, they vary, but you can throw a stone in any direction, especially in Joburg, and there will be a face-to-face meeting. So the meetings are recommended that the addict does, they say 90 in 90. So what that means is they do 90 meetings in 90 days. So it's consecutive meetings for 90 days. Not, Monday to Friday and then take Saturday and Sunday off, and then Monday to Friday, and then count those as your 90 and 90. This is 90 meetings in 90 days. And this is to start forming a new habit. This is starting a real solid foundation in recovery. And it's also where you start forming those new connections, meeting new people in recovery, meeting new friends, and it's a safe space for addicts. They can talk about, this is where they talk about their problems or what's going on for them. Usually find someone is sharing their experience, strength, and hope. people are sharing how they are dealing with life on life's terms and the solution and what they are doing to get through that. It's a place for addicts to relate, to what's being shared. It's also a reminder of, where the addict comes from, because there'll be newcomers that talk about the newcomer who's, straight out of addiction. This is their first meeting, who is terrified and everything. And you can see them and their fear and their doubt and all these things. And it's a reminder. Every meeting is a reminder of where the addict has come from and maybe how far the addict has come as well. It's a reminder that every day it's a program just for today. So it really is to form that new habit and especially new connections, because the opposite of addiction is connection, making those new friends. So it's very highly suggested that as soon as the addict leaves treatment, that they do 90 meetings in 90 days. And then they also talk about 2020. So it's arriving 20 minutes before the meeting starts and staying 20 minutes after the meeting starts. And this is so that, you can't just be rushing into the meeting, do a meeting, and then leave. You're not going to form those connections. You're not going to find your and we talk about a home group as well. Find new connections and new friends and getting comfortable and meeting the newcomer, and maybe going chatting about things that you couldn't speak about in the meeting, because it was a share or you didn't have time, or maybe you were just too nervous. The addict was too nervous to talk about what's really going on for them. So this is the opportunity, either 20 minutes before the meeting or 20 minutes after the meeting, going to someone, saying, I heard you share, thank you very much. I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that. So it's to start really connecting at the meetings, sort of networking, as we could say, and a lot of people after the meetings will go and have milkshake somewhere or coffee somewhere, and this is a place as well when they can start getting phone numbers. So when their sponsor doesn't pick up, they've got phone numbers to contact, when they need somebody to talk to, so they can have a list of new phone numbers as well. So they also start feeling a part of. And then at the meetings as well, this is where they will find their sponsors at the meetings. So there's a sponsor coordinator, and they also usually put up their hands at the end. They will ask who's willing to be a sponsor, and people will put up their hands, and that is where the newcomer, or if you're looking for a new sponsor, the addict can go up and say, hi, my name is so-and-so, I'm looking for a new sponsor. So the meeting is also where they find their sponsors, and then they can also find service positions at the meetings. And also during the 90 and 90, like they can go to AA or NA or CA, or, find the fellowship that they feel comfortable with and where they want to get their sponsors. And it's also part of what step work they will be doing as well. And then the addict can decide to make a home group. And this is the meeting, they call it the home group, the meeting that they will go to every single week. On a Tuesday at 7:30, they at a AA meeting in Northcliffe, and this is their home group, and this is where they can get the service position. And it's also nice having that home group, because if you don't, if the addict doesn't come for a week or 2 weeks, there are people there that care about them and will phone and be like, hi, how are you doing? I saw you weren't at the meeting. Are you okay? What's happening? And it also starts creating responsibility and accountability for going, to the meetings. So that is pillar number 1, meetings. Pillar number 2 is sponsor. So, like I said, this is where you will find them at the meetings. And a sponsor is someone who guides the addict through the 12 steps, the 12 steps step program. And a sponsor is free. It's, you don't pay for a sponsor. This is free. A sponsor is giving back and what they receive freely from their sponsor, giving back as part of service as well, giving back to the newcomers. So a sponsor is someone who guides them through the 12 steps. So there are requirements to be a sponsor. It's a minimum of 1 year clean and sober. So you can't, a sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous is free of alcohol, but still, smoking marijuana. So that is not advisable. They're not working a program of recovery. So it's a minimum of 1 year clean and sober. And they must have worked a minimum of 1 round of the 12 steps. They also need to work the 5 pillars. So a sponsor who's only going to meetings but not really focused on step work or service or anything like that, is this person working a program of recovery? Because the 5 pillars are essential. So they must be working their 5 pillars as well. When the addict is picking a sponsor, they must look at the sponsor and go, I want what you have. I want the recovery program that you are working. A sponsor also has to be of the same sex, because this is usually one of the first healthy, vulnerable relationships the addict will have with somebody. So you're going to be very vulnerable and honest, hopefully. And you're going to be sharing a lot of stuff with, the addict is sharing a lot of stuff with the sponsor. So it's quite easily for either or, the sponsor or the sponsee to start having feelings. It's just normal and natural to start gravitating to someone that you're having this really vulnerable, healthy relationship with. So it is really recommended, and it is like a rule that it must be of the same sex. Obviously, with nowadays, there's so much differences in sexuality. So, gay people will maybe need a straight sponsor. So a gay male will get a female sponsor. A lesbian will get a male sponsor, because it needs to be safe for both parties. So it's a spoken rule, same sex, or it needs to be safe for both parties. So a sponsor is, like I said, guides someone through the 12 steps. They are addicts themselves. They're just human and addicts as well. But they're not counselors or therapists, or they're not going to become the addict's best friend. The sponsor shouldn't be going to family bras or speaking to family members about anything. This is a relationship between the sponsor and the sponsee. So not becoming best friends, a sponsor needs to be able to call the sponsee out. They need to be separate. They can't be friends, because then it starts to blur the lines, too much. So there's no like lending money from your sponsor, or if your sponsor is asking you the addict, the sponsee to borrow money. I mean, these are starting to, lines are starting to be blurred. The sponsor is purely there to guide through the 12 steps, and then also obviously to be there if the sponsee is struggling or needs someone to talk to, or looking for some guidance in some decisions. But the sponsor only gives suggestions on their experience, what they've experienced. And if a sponsor is really sort of stuck, they phone their sponsor, So there's a sponsor behind every sponsor, and it goes sort of up the line. We talk about the grand sponsor and the grand sponsor. So there's lots of knowledge and experience that can be used by the sponsee. The sponsor's responsibility is not to run after the sponsee. Are you doing your meetings? Are you doing your step work? Are you working your 5 pillars? What's happening in your life? You haven't phoned me for a while or anything. It's not the sponsor's responsibility to run after the sponsee. The sponsee is responsible for building that relationship. And because the sponsee needs to learn how to reach out for help. If the sponsor is doing all the work, the sponsee is just going to sit back and not take any responsibility or accountability. So the sponsee is responsible for building this relationship and working on it and making sure they are doing what they need to do and reaching out and making contact with their sponsor. It's a long relationship. Some of the relationships last for years and years, because obviously recovery doesn't just end at the end of the 12 steps. Recovery is a lifelong journey. So it's, the relationship is ongoing for a long time. A sponsor can let go of a sponsee. So if the sponsee is not following suggestions, is not working the 5 pillars, not reaching out, not doing the step work, not going to meetings or anything, the sponsor can turn around to the sponsee and say, listen, you're not following my suggestions, you're not working a program of recovery, maybe it's time to look for a new sponsor. There might be times as well where it's just but it's between the sponsor and the sponsee to figure that out, be honest with each other, really try and work things out before moving on to another sponsor. The sponsee in the same hand can also turn around to the sponsor. The sponsee can turn around to the sponsor and say, listen, I was supposed to meet you on Saturday to go through step work. I was supposed to, and then you cancelled. We were supposed to get together on Monday and then you cancelled. Obviously, emergencies happen. Sponsors, like I said, are human, have lives, have jobs, and all those things. So obviously, within good reason, the sponsee can also turn around and say to the sponsor, listen, this is not working out, and maybe I need to look for another sponsor. But the first priority is for both parties to be honest, to be open, to set boundaries, to work in healthy communication, and to go through the 12 steps. Okay, and the next pillar is service. So service is at meetings, at the fellowship meetings, because the fellowships, all the different types of fellowships, are self-supporting. They are not governed by outside parties. They don't get money from anywhere. They don't get sponsored or anything. Meetings are run purely by addicts for addicts, and they are self-supporting within the fellowship. So being of service is a way of giving back, and to keep the meetings alive, because otherwise, if service was never, the service and the volunteering and giving back, if that never happened, meetings would just stop existing. The fellowships wouldn't be alive. So it's a way of giving back. And it just keeps the meetings going. So being of service as well is not just giving back because you're receiving, and benefit from it, but giving back, making sure the meetings stay open for the newcomer, for the still suffering addict that walk through those doors. So it's volunteer, and you usually get your service position at your home group. So you're going to go to that meeting every single week on a Tuesday at Hopper 7 Northcliffe. You're going to go to that meeting and you are on the service committee. So there's many different positions. So the addict, you usually start off at the bottom, which is like meet and greet, or setting up the coffee station, washing cups, setting out the chairs, emptying the ashtrays. And you can climb the ladder in the service committee. And it goes all the way up. We call it the GSR, which is the group service representative. And it goes from that specific meeting to, which is the group representative. Then there's the regional representative, then there's the national representative, then there's the country representative, and then it goes to world representative. I mean, service goes all the way up to world service representative. And it's a great way to be a part of, something and giving back. And being of service also helps with responsibility and accountability. And sometimes, the addict might feel, I don't feel like going to the meeting tonight. Oh, but just I have to go and set up the coffee station. No one's going to have coffee if I don't go to the meeting, you don't want to let people down, So it sort of also helps with responsibility and accountability and building self-worth and building self-esteem, and working with others. And service, we always say, it puts something between the addict and the addict, because the addict is the problem. So it's putting something between the addict and himself, and getting out of self. And there's so much benefit with being in service. So you can be of service at a meeting, at the fellowships, all the different types of fellowships. So you can be of service there, but you can also be of service at outside, volunteering at SPCA, or some of our halfway house people volunteer at a place called Children of Fire. These are kids that were burnt in house fires and things like that, so they're of service there. There's a place called Earth Center just up from the farm, who do equine therapy with disabled children, so there's plenty things of service. And we also always reiterate service begins at home, as well, making your bed, and helping with the dishes, maybe cooking a dinner or two. So service is also a very important pillar, because it's something between the addict and the addict, and so much is learned from that. Like I said, self-worth, self-esteem, working with others, being a part of something. There's nothing better than that feeling. So that is service. The next one is step work. So step work is the 12-step program. So it's those 12 steps They call it step work. So you will sit at home. There's different types of step work depending on the fellowship. So the AA will work out of the big book, and they've also got their own sort of worksheets and things that the sponsor will give to work on step work. NA has a step working guide, which is a whole lot of questions. Step 1, step 2, all the way down to step 12. CA's got the companion guide. So it's step work it starts obviously step 1, and it's a whole lot of questions that you need to answer for all different things. So you will start at step 1, obviously, and step work needs to be with a sponsor. You need to work with a sponsor with step work. You can't work. Addict cannot do step work alone and not working with a sponsor. It is not recommended. So the addict will sit at home, start writing, get a book, get the guides, the step working guides. They will start answering all the questions. Might get a little stuck. Phone the sponsor or message the sponsor. Oh, I don't understand this question. Don't know what it's asking me. And the sponsor will help, and they'll carry on. And the addict will finish step 1. When the addict has finished step 1, phones his sponsor, says, I finished my step 1, can we get together? And so they will get together and then go through the step work. So the sponsee will read his step work to his sponsor once he's finished that step 1 or whatever step they're on. And they go through it, and the sponsor will say, "Yeah, okay, that was really great." Or maybe maybe you can have a little bit of a look at here, or have a bit of a look there. Maybe look at those questions a little bit more, or add a little bit more, go a little deeper, or whatever. Or if the sponsor is happy, they will say, "Okay, we're ready to move on to step 2." And that's how it works. After every step, get together with the sponsor, start reading that step to the sponsor, and then the sponsor will say, okay, right, we're ready to move on to the next step. So that's how the sponsor guides the sponsee through the step work. And it's very important to work through with a sponsor, because some of the steps are quite hectic and can be quite dangerous if not guided by a sponsor through that, and their experience of having gone through that as well, and their experience of other sponsees that they've sponsored and going through those different steps. So it's quite dangerous not to work with a sponsor. Jumping steps also not advisable. Going from step 1 to step 9, no. Each step is in place for a reason. Each step guides the sponsee to the next step, and so forth and so forth. So also, if the sponsee is not being honest in his step work, the only person that the addict is hurting is themselves, because the sponsor is not going to, it's not a counselor or a therapist or anything. So they're not going to what you give and what you show is what the sponsor is going to work with. So if you're just bullshitting your way through it, the only person that is recovery is hurting is that addict that's doing the step work. So it's very important, like we said, be 3 things: honest, open-minded, and willing. Yeah, I think that is it. Sorry, just checking my notes. Okay. The last pillar is higher power. So they talk about a higher power or a power greater than yourself in the steps. And it is a pillar as well. And it is a higher power of their own understanding. So the sponsor doesn't have to have the same higher power, and that doesn't make a difference if you don't believe in the same higher power. Sorry, another thing I want to say about sponsors: the sponsor doesn't have to have used the same drugs have the same higher power, have the same history, must have children because I've got children, must be divorced because I've been divorced. The only thing that the addict should be looking for in their sponsor is their recovery and what their recovery looks like and how they are working their recovery. That is the most important thing. So higher power obviously is of their own understanding and their own concept. So having a higher power, obviously in the beginning, is to start having some hope. Hope that there's a power greater than themselves. Having hope that this program works. And then having some faith that if I put in the work and if I try and make that decision to start looking at a power greater than myself, starting to figure out what my higher power is, having that hope and faith is a great start. So it also helps with working on having a conscious contact during the day with a higher power. This is where you start practicing the powerlessness. I'm not in control of everything. I can't control everything. And the serenity prayer is a great place. With that, practicing the, powerlessness, accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can. Handing over as well. So I'm going to put in all the action that I need to in my day, and then I hand over the rest to my higher power, and start having that faith. Also, is where you start learning to let go, of guilt and pain and blame, and starting to find forgiveness, especially of themselves. And and then others as well. It's also a nice thing, when you start really building your understanding of that higher power and having that conscious contact throughout the day, that you're not alone. You're never alone. You can always just sit and have that contact, however you understand it, however you want to practice it, however it works, for the addict. So you're not alone, and it's finding a purpose, finding a new purpose as well. And the step 11 is through prayer and meditation. It's also realizing I can't run on, the addict can't run on self-will, because the addict's thinking and behavior didn't work, ended up being in rehab or, at the meetings. So also letting go of that self-will and allowing a power or a higher power greater than themselves be in charge. So yeah, those are the 5 pillars. And like I was saying in the beginning, it really is imperative that the addict is working all 5 pillars, So yeah, especially in the 90 and 90, they must hit the ground running and get those 5 pillars, in check straight away, within the first couple of days. Those 5 pillars should be in check, and they should really start working on those 5 pillars. First year as well, like plugged into the program, it does, vacillate, might not have had conscious contact with my higher power today. I didn't phone my sponsor. But if the addict is not working their 5 pillars consciously and connected to them, they can start feeling the difference when they're not, And if the 5 pillars are really falling away at the wayside, the relapse process has already started. If you can't just stay in recovery by just going to meetings. You can't stay in recovery by only having a sponsor. you have to have all 5 pillars to be in recovery and on that path. Because if you start dropping any of those 5 pillars, and like I said, like the life raft, if 3 of the pillars have gone, you are really in the process of a relapse. And you need to bring the addict needs to bring themselves in check and get back on the saddle and get those 5 pillars in check. If you talk to anybody that has relapsed, it is usually because they are not working. It's 99% they're not working their 5 pillars, all 5 pillars. It is essential. It is recovery. It is the sole drive of recovery, and how to live life on life's terms and to find a new way to live. I think that's me. Thank you very much. If anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. There was a question about do the clients do the 12 steps in rehab and then redo them when they come out and then just do them over and over? I don't mind answering that one. So how
Sure.
it works, how it works in our facility is we Changes specifically, we don't focus on all 12 steps. We start off with step 1, and that's kind of what we tell the patients as well, is that yes, they're doing step 1 with us, but when they leave rehab, depending on the sponsor may tell them to start step 1 again, or they'll carry on with step 2. But in terms of the steps as a whole, it is an ongoing, continuous process. You do the steps round after round after round. But I think it's the rate at which you do them that may differ from person to person. So it may take one person 6 months to do all 12. And then when they do the next round of steps, it maybe takes a year to do it. So it varies in that instance. But yes, the 12 steps do get done over and over.
Sorry, Lolly, can I just add on? So yeah, the
Yes,
first
please
round
do.
of steps. Yeah. So the first round of steps, like Lolly said, depending on the person's progress and how quickly or slowly they go through the steps, can take up to a year. So that is solely working on and going straight into addiction, the drugs, and then cleaning house, starting to work on themselves and taking responsibility and accountability for their behavior, their thinking, taking responsibility for their side of the street. And then the other steps are maintenance steps and things like that. And then the next round of steps, you will start working on things that are coming up in life, life on life's terms. You start working on the next round of steps. Usually, what's going on now? Now I'm seeing that I'm angry, or I'm impatient, and I'm intolerant, and I'm not coping really well. So the next round of steps, we'll start working on the behaviors now of the addict and what's going on for them in their lives at the time. And that's how you just keep going. You just keep working, because things are always coming up throughout life, and that's how they'll work the rest of the 12 steps.
Okay. There's a question, Ingrid. How do we handle a relapse after a few months of sobriety?
Well, depending on the relapse, how long has it been going on for? Was it just one little oopsie slip? I just had, by mistake, took a sip, of a drink, or just smoked one joint. It depends on the relapse. The best thing is for the addict also to phone their sponsor and let their sponsor know that this has happened. you know, Get hold of his counsellor from Changes. Give Changes a call. Let us know as well. Cheryl and all the old counsellor can guide you through, what is the best process. So reach out for help if the addict has relapsed. You're more than welcome to reach out to Changes, and Changes will guide you through that. But also tell the addict they need to get hold of their sponsor and be honest with their sponsor that they have relapsed.
Yeah. And just to add on to there, I mean, if you're speaking from your perspective, as in what do you as the loved one do in that kind of situation versus what does the addict do in that kind of a situation? I think if your loved one is currently in treatment, it's a great opportunity now to start to think of what kind of boundaries can we set in place, what kind of rules and regulations can we have should a person relapse? I mean, we obviously hope that the loved ones don't relapse, but things do happen. And I think it also provides you as the loved one with some sense of peace to be like, okay, at least there's some sort of contingency plan should something like that happen. And it's important to not shy away from those kinds of discussions, because should that situation arise and, shit's hitting the fan, mind my language there, you don't want to be kind of in a tornado of panic and what do we do now and who do I talk to? I think it's important that whilst you are right now in the space, even after this meeting, start thinking for yourself, okay, what are some of the rules and regulations? What am I going to tolerate? What am I not going to tolerate? And then have an open conversation with your loved one when they return so that both of you are safe, because as much as they're with us, we're working with them, they're getting the tools. It's important that you too make sure that you are protected within your home space, or just the space of being open with your family. Then the next question is, so do they need to complete a certain number of the steps and changes? Example number 1 and number 7. So how it works is it works systematically. You can't do step 3 without having done step 1. So whether it's with Changes or another facility, or even if a person doesn't go into a treatment center, you start at one and work your way through. And that highlights the importance of the sponsor, because the sponsor is the one that's going to guide them through the steps and say, look, feel like maybe your step 1 is lacking a little bit. How about just relook at it again, or something along those lines, so it is a very systematic step by step process. You don't just do all 12 in one sitting. I hope that explains it. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add there, Ingrid, before we go to the next question.
Yeah, like I said, one step leads into the next step. You can't jump steps. And yes, the sponsor, you read your step work to your sponsor, and the sponsor is the one who's like, yes, great job, we're moving on to the next step. Or like I said, we need to look here, we need to look there. And then sometimes you might be at step 3, which is we hand our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And maybe you're struggling with your higher power still, or the acceptance, that you're an addict or alcoholic. Things might be coming up. The sponsor might say, I think maybe you need to go back to step 1 again and look a bit differently at it, so the sponsor guides the sponsee through the step work.
Okay, then the next question, do they get assigned sponsors before they leave Changes or start the research when they get home? So that one, how we like to operate is, should the individual have such a concern, the counselors as a team will discuss, okay, maybe we can suggest someone, but it's still the individual's responsibility to contact that sponsor. So I may say, yeah, you know what, Ingrid might be a good sponsor for you. Here's Ingrid's number, but it still lands on the individual to contact the sponsor. And then in terms of the meeting space, is that in the meeting space, how it works is they do say, you know, is anyone looking for a sponsor? Is there anyone willing to sponsor? Hands get raised, and then people get approached, but the responsibility still falls on the individual. So it just depends on person to person. We don't allocate sponsors. That's not our responsibility. I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that one, Ingrid.
No, yeah. We don't, we might suggest, but like Lolly said, it's up to the individual to do the work and get hold of the sponsor, and then take, the courage and the leap of faith to approach someone at a meeting and ask them to be their sponsor.
Okay. Then the next question is, where does one get our loved ones to do 90 meetings in 90 days? So we as a team also obviously have a list of meetings. Each person has like their own feel for the meeting. So we do provide suggestions depending on the area that the person is in, but the different fellowships have their own websites, and you are able to find the meetings from those websites. Again, the individual, the responsibility, falls on the individual to come to maybe a staff member to say, look, I live in this area. I'm not so sure about the meetings in that area. Are you able to help me? Or maybe when they get home and they're searching the internet and they're struggling to find something, they're more than welcome to contact us to see if we can help. And I mean, the one thing about the 1990 that I myself personally like to tell the patients when I see them is, first I'll ask them, how long have you been in addiction? Most of the times it's more than 3 years. So I'm like, is it realistic that in 3 weeks you're going to get over 3 years of addiction? No, it's not realistic. So that's why it's important to tie them to a close program of recovery, especially in the early days. Not to say that after the early recovery that you can become completely relaxed. It's just to make sure that you're getting into the habit and seeing the value of what you're doing, and then encouraged to continue thereafter. I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that one before I go into the next one.
No, I think you covered it, Lolly.
Yeah, cool. If you want specifics on the websites, you can contact the sponsor and the counselor, and they can let you know. And then the last question in the chat: do the sponsors get training on how to be an effective sponsor? I.e., can someone get a not a great sponsor? I don't know if you want to take that one, Ingrid.
Yeah, I can take that one. So a sponsor learns from their sponsor. They will guide their sponsees through the 12 steps, how they were guided by their sponsor and how their sponsor showed them how to work, be in recovery, and suggestions and all sorts of things. So they usually follow suit from their sponsors. So, yeah, unfortunately, not all sponsors are healthy. Um, you know, Sponsors are also addicts, and they're human, and they've got their own faults and issues, and maybe they weren't guided through the 12 steps properly, or whatever. And like I reiterate, also addicts. So not everyone is perfect. Not every sponsor is perfect and is going to do the most wonderful job, but it's a learning for both sponsor and both sponsee, and it's about the healthy communication, um, and the sponsee needs to take the responsibility, to also know what's right and wrong. I mean, they have free will. and they can also put in the boundaries, and they also need to learn how to say no, and they need to learn to question, and they need to learn to, how they want to work their recovery, and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. um, so yeah, unfortunately sometimes those relationships um, don't work, or uh, you know, not all sponsors, some sponsors relapse, unfortunately, as well. Like I said, sponsors are addicts.
Yeah, and I think what I can add on to there is the sponsor-sponsee relationship is so individualized. I mean, what may work for one person, so maybe one individual prefers a more directive approach, and another person may not respond well to that and needs a bit of a softer approach. But it is at the end of the day the responsibility of the sponsee, or let's just say the patient in this instance, to look for someone that emulates the recovery that they want. So not to focus on this is they use the same type of substance that I did, you know. If you're an individual that's looking for a life with a like good, healthy communication with family, um, and a nice solid recovery, and you see they hear someone's story and they're like, okay, that is sounds like the recovery that I would also like, then that's how you create that approach. And people are human. At the end of the day, everyone is human, in this instance. So it's difficult to say, okay, that one's definitely going to be a great individual sponsor for that person. I hope that answers everyone's question.